Ooh, okay. No, I think it's going. I think it might take a minute.
Yeah, you're going live right now.
Oh my god.
Wow.
We got it like 1 minute right before.
All the technical stuff, huh?
Yeah, because, just trying to simultaneously do this.
Right.
Yeah, it's working on Facebook. Thank you. There's a lag. Okay. I guess we'll wait for a couple of people
Yeah.
to let me.
Did a lot of folks RSVP or?
Yeah, we had about 20.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm just trying to text one of our admin. She's going to be helping to monitor the comments and everything.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so how's your day been?
It's different now, not going into the office or anything. Yeah, so just kind of working from home, kind of creating my own schedule, which is really nice. So yeah.
Yeah, but I love your office.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, if this is where I'm going to be all the time now, I need to make it like as I need to love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So, but are you going back into the office still? Like I think you said a couple times, right?
Yeah. So, or I guess my team and I were in the office, but classes are still virtual right now. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we can start.
Okay. I mean, or if you wanted to give it a couple more minutes for more.
Actually, yeah. We have 5 viewers right now, so we'll.
Okay.
Oh, we have my dad's friend from Taiwan is joining.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
But that's so
amazing
amazing.
How this.
Right. That you can kind of really reach the masses and across, oceans. I think that's really incredible. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. What about me? Because my mic it's like at the bottom, but I don't know.
No.
You can hear me?
Hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just going to pull up.
I'm hoping my internet is okay because earlier today it kept crashing. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's okay. All right, how about we wait until there's like maybe 10 people?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it's like there's 8 now. So.
Oh, you can see. Okay.
Yeah. Is it the number next to kind of the live thing at the top?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess for me, because it's like my room,
right?
Then like between me and you, so then I can only see like just you.
Oh.
Like actually also be on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Hi Janice. Hi Grace.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining in.
Yeah, we're gonna start real soon. Hi Helen. Oh. Hi Grace.
Hi people. Okay, then we just need one more.
Oh my gosh!
Thanks for coming out, guys.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your support. So I guess we'll get started then. Yeah, so I'm Jocelyn Park. I'm the Executive Director of APLUS Learning Center. And tonight we will be talking about how we can support our students' mental health and well-being. It's definitely been a really challenging year and a half, almost 2 years. Especially for students with everything from going, in person to virtual and then back to in person. That social isolation, just it's been a lot to deal with. I think even for myself, I'm not a student, but we can all attest just the past year and a half, it's been really difficult. And I think, the topic of mental health, a lot of times, especially in the AAPI community, it can be ignored. And so that's primarily the reason why we're doing this. I am joined tonight by my friend and also licensed family therapist, Miss Jennifer Chen. She will introduce herself in a little bit, just her background and her experience with mental health and with dealing with adolescents and families. This is definitely a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, so we wanted to get the conversation going, and we will try to be mindful of your time. Again, thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully we'll be done in about an hour, but yeah, Jen, I guess you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for reaching out to me, inviting me to do this really, and kind of just spreading the awareness about mental health and having this conversation. Obviously something that I'm really passionate about, and this is my line of work and this is what I do. So just a brief blurb about myself. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Maryland, College Park. And then I went on and got my master's degree in psychological counseling from Teachers College at Columbia University. I've been a therapist now for over 10 years. I'm also a board certified supervisor, and I was a former site director at an outpatient mental health clinic. I've worked with, children, adolescents, families, adults in a variety of settings, obviously in outpatient mental health clinics to inpatient, residential, school settings, private practice settings, and even a prison setting. And I've worked with kind of everything from ADHD to depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, and trauma-related disorders. So again, this is what I'm really passionate about and what I care about, and really wanting to help others and live healthier, fulfilling lives. So yeah, and I think kind of Jocelyn, you really kind of touched on in terms of, the AAPI community and, mental health being really stigmatized a lot and across all cultures actually. But, and unfortunately, that stigma has, I think, it can be very harmful. And seeing how mental health is really just as important as physical health, right? When we aren't feeling good physically, we go to the doctor and, we get catch a cold and we get medicine, right? So kind of the same thing with mental health. When we're not feeling well mentally and emotionally, it's the same thing of kind of reaching out and getting support and services to treat it, to feel better. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's until, we view mental health as part of the body, right? That, it does affect our brain, and our brain affects, our thoughts, our actions, and those manifest. And I just feel like, we're not all there yet, but I know we're moving in the right direction, especially by talking about these things. I think a lot of times, there's a lot of fear or maybe shame in seeking out resources. You may know, as a parent, you may know that your child is struggling, but it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly how to seek out those resources, or even like who to turn to. Because I know, I think, well, I guess for our parents' generation, the first generation immigrants, I think for them, it's hard to share these difficult things, even with friends. I think it's really easy to just put on like, you know, a smiling face all the time and just pretend like you have it all figured out, or, you know, everything's all good. But even though deep inside it's like, you know that it's not, but you'd rather put on that face than, you know, show sort of vulnerability and transparency. And so I guess, I don't know, we can talk a little bit about our own sort of mental health journeys a little bit. Just to give context, I think bringing in like our own personal narratives will definitely help to, you know, set the tone. And I know a lot of parents are tuning in. Both Jen and I are also parents of young children. So again, like these issues are near and dear to our heart, you know, trying to, for me, I'm like starting to see things in Audrey where it's like she already knows what shame feels like, or she already knows, maybe she doesn't know how to articulate it, but she knows like the feeling, right? Or even like trying to advocate for their own needs, trying to speak up and letting their teachers or, you know, their parents know what exactly they need, or and I think that's such a, it sounds really easy to do, or like it's not rocket science, right? Like it should be easy to bring up, you know, I need this from you, or I want this from you, but it's hard. I think it's like a work in progress, even for myself as an adult.
Yeah, and I think, Jocelyn, in terms of kind of, like you said, I think it goes back to because we don't have conversations about difficult things. We don't talk to people all the time about what we're struggling with, what we're feeling. And so when we don't do that, and as parents, you know, we're not modeling that to our children, so then they don't know how to express themselves, right? And so like you said, it's actually a very basic, easy thing to do to say, hey, I need this, or I need help with this. But they don't know how to express that, or they don't even know maybe what emotions they might be experiencing, because we're not teaching them about that. You know, as parents, of course, we want our children to succeed and, you know, do well in school and everything like that. But I think a lot of times we forget that we also need to teach our children how to deal with tough things, you know, how to have tough conversations, how to cope with different emotions, from anger to anxiety, sadness, right, in healthy ways, and talking about it, right? Because a lot of times we, you know, again, we stay silent about it, or we just say, okay, you know what, it's not a big deal. You need to just tough it out and keep it going, right? You know, get those grades or do what you have to do. And like I said, so many people end up suffering in silence, and then lead to unhealthy ways of dealing with things, right? So it's not just teaching our children about, you know, how to do well in school, but it's how to do well in life and how to prepare for life, right? And you know, teaching our children how to self-regulate and how to think critically, right?
Yeah, such an important skill. And I think like as parents, it's also really easy to think we know like exactly what our child needs without ever really having to hear it from them. But you know, that disconnect right there, I think, is really important to address too, because we as parents, it pains us to see, you know, our kids suffer, or, you know, deal with things that we don't really know how to deal with. But if we try to prescribe to them like what we feel like is the solution without hearing from them, then I think that again like downplays and, you know, lessens the opportunity for them to vocalize and for them to articulate and put words to their feelings, and be able to advocate for themselves.
And that's so important, that we give space for our children to give them also time to process and kind of think about what they want to say and not feeding words for them and, giving them options and teaching them, okay, these are the different things, what best fits you, and then having them hopefully be able to say it in their own words. Like my oldest daughter, obviously, this last couple of years, year and a half of virtual learning, it's impacted her tremendously having to do virtual learning and not really having that peer interaction. And so I remember when schools opened up, like with the hybrid model end of last year, of course, I was like, yeah, let's send her back. She needs that interaction. And that first couple of weeks was a little bit tough. It was just kind of trying to find her footing again and trying to learn and kind of, get reacclimated with interacting with peers again. And at night before bedtime, she would come up to me and she'd say, oh, Mommy, like I have a couple worries or I'm worried about this. And I'm so grateful that she felt comfortable to come to me and tell me about her worries. And I would, and I'm always like checking in with her, just, do you have any new worries or old worries that are coming up for you? And to have that kind of space and communication. And then what we ended up doing was kind of creating like a worry box so that, she could write down her worries, put it in a box, and then not have to keep thinking about it. And that seemed to help her a lot as she kind of continued to get adjusted. And now she's loving school, and doing her thing. So
that's such a good tip. I think for those of you out there with young children, I think that whole worry jar thing would be, I don't know, it's a great exercise. Practicing, first of all, like articulating, again, putting pen to paper, which I see a lot of students struggle with, not just like with their feelings, but like writing in general, which we can talk about later, but just, practicing that, I think that's a great exercise for young kids.
Yeah. And, I think, obviously, like you mentioned earlier too, Jocelyn, I think we've all experienced a level of anxiety during the last year and a half. And just, every day it's just changing and we don't know what to expect, right? So imagine our kids and what that's like for them and being isolated for such a long period of time, on top of that constant pressure to do well in school, right? Especially in the AAPI community. And what was kind of frustrating to see, I think, from an educational standpoint, was this year and a half, things changed dramatically, right? Teaching modalities changed, right? But the one thing that didn't change was what I often noticed and observed was parents' expectations. They carried the same level of expectations as if their child were, in regular school. And we didn't have this major shift in our day-to-day life, right? And that's kind of setting ourselves up for failure, in a sense, where, a lot of kids just weren't able to perform as well as they typically do, or again, just really struggled because, virtual learning can be so difficult. Well, for some and others can really thrive from it. So it just kind of all depends on your individual child's learning needs, right? But I think it's important to be mindful of our expectations for our children, also modeling our children's expectations of themselves and making sure they're realistic and achievable and supportive, right? So yeah, I think that also can add to a lot of anxiety in our kids.
Yeah. And I guess we can talk about like kind of 3 of the most common, mental health challenges that you've been seeing within, your clients, but also just like students across, the nation, the world. I think a lot of them can get kind of, at least for me, like my understanding of like some of them there's like an overlap. But yeah, I think it would be really great to hear, from you, just like 3 of the most common mental health challenges and issues that you've been seeing in students since COVID.
I think number one is the amount of anxiety that has increased for so many kids. So anxiety and depression. A lot of more kids getting more and more depressed because if again you think about there's no routine or structure anymore, and then not being able to see your friends and like get out of the house. That it forced all of us to kind of isolate, right? And if the little ones, for example, have a hard time, like they don't have cell phones or anything, they can't reach out to their friends or connect, that can be really tough. So definitely an increase in anxiety, depression, and unfortunately, more suicidal ideation and an increase in hospitalizations, because, just so many kids have been suffering this year and a half. I think there's also a mental health crisis going on, and now that schools are open, I think it's only a matter of time. I think right now, kids are just excited to see their friends again and be in school. But I think we're going to see some of the longer term impact from COVID and the pandemic. And just in some ways a positive thing, because I think more and more people are acknowledging mental health, right? And seeing, the impact of mental health on our kids and taking it seriously now, right? And so in one sense, it's a good thing because there's more awareness about it and more people can then, get, resources or get access to supports, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's definitely skyrocketed in kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I guess Jamie has a question for us. She says, how can parents be better advocates for our kids' social emotional learning in school?
One good thing that I've been seeing across different counties is, for example, in Prince George's County, which was the county that I used to work in, they created a new program. They've always had this program, but it keeps evolving every year, where they hire kind of outside providers to come in for, every school. The goal is to get every school in the county to have kind of like this mental health expert, not just guidance counselors, right? When you think of guidance counselors in the schools, a lot of their day is with dealing with administrative tasks, right? So they just don't have the time and the means to really dedicate that, all day to mental health, right? And so kind of schools, contracting with other providers, mental health providers, to come into the school to be that mental health expert, to be that mental health advocate, to be that mental health support. Obviously, one person is not enough, but it's a start. And I'm seeing that too in, Montgomery County schools too. I think a lot of schools have done a great job with the guidance counselors, the principals and vice principals, kind of promoting the importance of, social emotional learning and incorporating that into the classroom. And I'm seeing more teachers also utilize different skills to teach that, which is amazing. And that's really what's needed too, not just the academic skills, but also the social emotional learning skills.
Yeah.
And then, I think, as a parent is, if we feel maybe the school can do more, or we don't feel like there's, enough education on that, is kind of, again, reaching out to the principals, the vice principals, the guidance counselors, to see what they can do. And kind of, it's a team effort too, and so kind of the more people who gather and really support, mental health in schools, that's fantastic. So, yeah.
That's really good. Definitely hearing from the parents, I think, is important. And I know teachers in Montgomery County, they received some training, I think, this past summer. There were some modules on social emotional learning. So that should be good that they, recognize that there was a need for that. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear about, I guess, more about like ADD and ADHD. I know I've had several conversations with some of our parents, who have gotten help, I guess, for their child, and their child was diagnosed with either ADD or ADHD. And they asked me for, tutors or teachers who specialize in teaching students with ADHD and ADD. And for me, I'm like, I definitely see that there's a need for teachers to get, I guess, more experience with students of all different kinds of backgrounds. And I also know, though, that sometimes my mom can be like, oh, it seems like you can't focus. And for me, like, I think this past year and a half, that's so true, that I just feel so scattered. And so sometimes I wonder, like, do I also have maybe like some sort of, I don't know, ADHD or ADD, but I would love to hear sort of your take on that, and, with both students and adults that you see.
Yeah. ADHD is definitely, a very common diagnosis, especially in kids, and you also see adults with ADHD too who really struggle with some of those symptoms.
Yeah.
We are kind of more mindful, though, of not wanting to overdiagnose folks with ADHD, right? Because, sometimes there may be other factors that's contributing to difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing, staying on task, things like that. And so whether someone's been through a traumatic, experience in their lifetime, or they're dealing with a lot of environmental stressors that make it hard to focus. I think, Jocelyn, a lot of us this past, again, year and a half with the pandemic, we've all, I think, been a little bit scatterbrained because our lives have been turned upside down, right? And so kind of be mindful of those factors.
Yeah.
But then certainly there are many people, though, who do meet the criteria for ADHD. And so, ADHD can be managed pretty well with the help of medications. So that's typically kind of a primary treatment of ADHD, but also having therapy to work on interventions to improve the symptoms or manage the symptoms. So it's just kind of understanding, like you said, Jocelyn, kind of being familiar with the different kind of diagnoses in a way, or of just kind of learning more about it, to then kind of tailor how you work with a student or a child who needs ADHD.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I never thought about ADHD sort of manifesting itself as a response to a traumatic experience. It just I always thought of it as by just its own sort of discrete thing. I feel like mental health, this topic is just like, we could talk about it for hours. There's like so many things that are linked, and I think, I guess, depending on how this sort of session is received, we are wanting to keep the door open and seeing if if there's an interest in sort of delving into some of these topics that we're talking about now in more depth and detail. So definitely let us know. I know Nicole had put our Google form in the chat box, in the comment box. So if you haven't filled it out, please, please, please fill it out. After this session, I will also be sending out sort of a fact sheet and just some of the resources that we'll be talking about later. And so, it would be great to get your information. So Grace says that, I feel like there are so many benefits in seeing a therapist, which is so true. Another thing that I feel like is highly stigmatized. Would you recommend children seeing a therapist, even if you might not see any red flags, but more as a proactive approach? If so, what age would be appropriate? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I'm a strong believer that, if you're human, you would benefit from some therapy, right? we all have our own stuff. We all have things that we can work on and improve on, and just developing self-awareness. Really, a lot of it starts with self-awareness, and then that's how we can grow and really be able to learn how to, again, manage whatever situations we have going on in our lives. So again, and I might be biased because I am a therapist, but therapy really, it can be very beneficial. There's so many benefits from seeing someone and talking to someone. And especially with children too, right? I think so oftentimes our society is very reactive. And when it comes to almost everything, is that it's always kind of after the fact, right? We try to fix something or improve something after something has already happened, right? So therapy can, yes, be a very positive, proactive approach to preventing, worst case scenarios from occurring, right? There is no kind of right or wrong time to engage in therapy. It is there, it is open, and it's really a matter of, the person wanting it and being open to it, right? So with children, though, we've seen children as young as 3 in therapy. It's a very kind of different kind of therapy when you're working with the little ones. A lot of times they'll use, play therapy techniques. And so it's just a different form of therapy, because obviously you're not going to be having these, deep, meaningful conversations, right, with like a 5-year-old, right? But it's a great way to provide psychoeducation to our children, to start teaching them. Like, if you feel like you're not equipped with the tools to kind of teach your child that social emotional learning skills, right? Certainly going to a therapist can be helpful in kind of providing that psychoeducation to your child, and again, giving your child a space to talk about what's going on for them. And what a lot of therapy does is it validates people's experiencing, and sometimes, like, when we're speaking to our parents, right? Our parents may not always be validating. They got their own stuff going on, or they're busy, they're working, and then sometimes we kind of overlook our children's those signs that our children are trying to talk to us, right? So it doesn't hurt. It's I think it can only add to just a more positive experience and improve communication, interactions, understanding of things. So, again, you could have kids as young as 3, start therapy till whenever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. Do you ever, if let's say you're seeing a child and then the parent gets kind of interested in wanting to see a therapist as well? I'm sure that kind of happens because they see the progress that the child is making. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many conversations with people just about how, as adults, I should say as parents, because ever since having kids, I think just things have popped up so often, triggers for me, right? If my child does ABC, it's why am I so triggered by these things? And then it sort of brings me back to, my own childhood, perhaps a traumatic experience, or one, something that I thought I had gotten over, right, so to speak. But it's very much a part of me. And I see that through my parenting and through, my interactions with my children. Do you ever see that?
Yes. Actually, a lot of the times when we're working with the children, we realize a lot of the issues isn't so much the child, but actually the parent, right? So obviously, there are kids with more severe behavioral issues and diagnoses that, really need that support. But when working with children, it is a lot of family work and getting parents or whoever their guardians are, caretakers are involved. in their treatment. And yes, absolutely. A lot of times, then the parents or caregiver will say, yes, sign me up too, hopefully, or unfortunately, sometimes they don't see that they have anything to do with it, right? But I mean, that makes sense though, for us to be, our parenting is a lot based on what, our parents, how they parented us, right? And because that's what we know and that's what we've seen, right? We don't know otherwise, right? So again, I think it's just so important as a parent, anyone, again, if you're human, therapy can be helpful. So, yeah.
Awareness definitely is the first step that I see. And then just like openness to like talking about your baggage, right? And I guess one thing that I also wanted to touch upon that I think will resonate a lot with parents here is just how do we make our child feel safe at home so that they feel like they can share these emotions or these needs that they have with us. I think one of the biggest, I guess, hurdles and barriers that I see with our students is just they feel like, okay, that's mom and dad. Like, I don't want to, burden them, or like I don't have a close relationship with them. I can't really open up and talk to them. Or when it comes down to it, it's like I just don't feel safe because my emotions have not been, like you said, validated. The most common response, unfortunately, is just like, just get over it. Like, you just suck it up. Life is hard. Just deal with it. And then I feel like those feelings get so repressed that you don't even become aware of them as an adult. And so obviously we want to nip that in the bud, right? We want to start early. We want to be able to establish that home environment where our kids feel safe with us and, they are open to talking about things that are going on in school with us. So how would you say would be like, I guess, what would the first step be towards sort of going in that direction and building that, cultivating that in our families?
Because yes, and that responsibility absolutely falls on the parents, right? It is the parents' responsibility to set that tone and to create that environment, right? So part of whether it's just which I'm sure so many of us do, right, is just kind of checking in with our kids every day, at the dinner table, turning off all electronics, TV, phones, sitting at the table and going around and saying, okay, what was a challenge today for you, and what was something that was positive for you, right? Tell me something positive about your day. Tell me a challenge about your day, right? And just, again, I think it's having those direct conversations and just communicating directly and openly and honestly, right? And also admitting too that, we're human too, and we have stressful days. And sometimes we ourselves may not be kind of emotionally available for our children because we have all this other stuff that's going on. And it's okay. And it's actually really important to acknowledge that to our children, right? To let our children know that, hey, I'm also having a bad day, but this is how, and then what you're going to do is you're going to model healthy ways to deal with that. And they're going to see you as a parent being open about the vulnerabilities, admitting to when we're struggling, right? Seeing that not as a weakness, but we all struggle at some point, right? We all have our struggles, right? And it's not a weakness, right? So they see that, okay, I can talk about when I'm struggling and it's okay. And then learn healthy ways to deal with it and address things and then kind of, again, and also fostering that close relationship, right? And feeling connected to our children, right? I think every parent would want their child to come to them first, right? Before going to someone else, right? But I think a lot of kids don't feel comfortable going to the parents because of, X, Y, and Z, right?
But I think that the silver lining is that it's never too late to just set aside, that intention and that time. I think time is such a commodity, right? That we're always trying to get more of it. But I think just, setting aside that time, again, being intentional and, having those conversations and being with your children, I think, being present, I should say, with your children, I think that really speaks volumes, especially in this day and age when just technology has made it so that it's so difficult to stay present in the moment, right? Like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, like God forbid, like an hour. You're like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at my phone for the past hour. Like, what's going on? That's definitely me. But yeah, so I think really starting to build those relationships, I think, will really help to, be there and be an advocate for your child when it comes to mental health too. And these difficult topics.
And, I think there's, again, so many benefits from it, right? If we focus on our children's mental health, then they're going to do better in school, right? They're going to have better interactions with their peers. They're going to have better interactions with us as parents, right? So there's only benefits from, from addressing mental health, just like we address physical health, right?
Yeah, it all starts with viewing it as a basic need, right? Like I always think about, I know in psychology it's like Maslow's hierarchy. Right? It's like we need to have food, we need to have water, but like also health is wealth, and that includes mental health. Like if I'm not doing well mentally, forget about everything else, like I won't be able to handle anything else. So I think it's really important for the moms. Like I just feel so much for the moms. There's been so many articles and just like social media posts out there about how this past year and a half has been really difficult, especially for moms. I just feel, again, like all over the place. My attention is so fractured, but I think we're all in this together, and we're all sort of figuring it out together. So
And I mean, and to kind of, address that is really highlighting self-care too, and being kind to ourselves. I mean, I can only imagine all the parents out there who, couldn't, didn't have daycare or childcare, school, had to work from home while having the kids do virtual school. I did that for like 3 months, and that was probably the worst 3 months of my life. I think I blocked out those 3 months because it was complete chaos.
Right.
And it was impossible. It's impossible to work and care for your kid and be a teacher to your kid all at the same time. And I think so many of us were stretched in ways that we've never had to stretch in that way. So one thing I think is also reminding ourselves of our resilience and being able to get through that. And we're still here. And just being kind to ourselves and giving us grace. And again, kind of going back to realistic expectations, right? Having realistic expectations for
even
ourselves.
For yourself. So I guess I wanted to also talk a little bit about just bringing up suicide awareness and prevention, especially since September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and it is a really serious topic, and I know it's a difficult thing to talk about, but I think it's also something really important, especially since it is very much linked to mental health. Just I guess we can talk a bit about like the symptoms or like the signs, and how parents can recognize those and perhaps seek help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, suicide rates unfortunately have definitely increased among teens significantly, and it's just, again, so important to be aware of and really take seriously.
Right.
And so, some common risk factors too is you want to think about, any history of depression, anxiety, obviously any family history of suicide or substance abuse, exposure to violence, abuse, or trauma, social isolation, bullying, and even feeling stigmatized too can be a risk factor. So, but other warning signs is, again, that's why it is so important to be checking in with your kids and talking to them, and creating that safe environment so that they can go to you when they're struggling or when they're not, feeling well emotionally, right? But if you notice them kind of talking about suicide or wanting to die, on social media, maybe they may be texting a friend about it, right? If your child or someone you know is feeling hopeless or trapped, increased use of drugs or alcohol, changes in weight, appearance, sleep habits, isolating themselves, withdrawing from friends, trouble concentrating even, or drop in academic performance, risk-taking or kind of self-destructive behavior, or even kind of settling, becoming kind of calm and cheerful after a long period of depression. So just kind of some signs to look out for. And there's so many resources out there too with information about this too. So, but if you notice anyone or your child kind of showing signs or, expressing suicidal ideation, one, is important to not leave that person alone, obviously. Making sure, you're removing any objects or items that they could use. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And of course, taking your child, if you needed to the emergency room. And there's also, I think, a lot of stigma about going to the hospital. And a lot of people, being hospitalized for psychiatric reasons or what have you. But the hospitals is a place to help us, right? To help us get better physically and mentally, right? And the hospital setting is a place that will keep your child safe. So if you feel like you can't keep your child safe, that's when you take your child to the hospital, because the hospital can do that and provide programs and supports and get you connected to resources to help your child. So it's really important that we don't overlook that, right? And it may feel like a very scary experience and feeling. Of course, no one wants to go to the hospital, right, for any reason. But that is a major resource, and one that people should definitely do if that's the case. So, yeah.
So I wanted to talk about just how, you were touching upon social media and how that can play into, suicidal ideations and things like that. And we are seeing such a huge uptick of cyberbullying, bullying through social media, and just even like the glorification, I guess, of dangerous acts on TikTok. There's just been so many, and I'm just interested to hear sort of your perspective about how parents can, I don't want to say intervene, but intervene, if they're seeing these sorts of bad habits or, things come out of social media that's not good. I think technology, again, it's like a double-edged sword. Like, even us being able to talk, online and to be able to reach the masses right now is huge. But like at the same time, like just how addicting our devices have become, how social media has become a place of just really toxic, comments or things about like self-image. It's just not good, especially if you're an adolescent and you're sort of in these formative years, right? Developing your sense of identity. So if you could speak to, how parents can support their child if they're starting to see, these bad habits manifest, how they can sort of, help without being, because, kids at that age, it's also like, they're on social media because of their peers, right? Like they want to be in the know. They want to be cool, so to speak. We've all been there, even though for us, like social media wasn't a thing. But like I definitely remember that sort of wanting to be popular, wanting to, make a lot of friends and have people like me. Yeah.
And I'm actually very grateful that we didn't have social media growing up.
Yeah, it just would have compounded, like exacerbated things just tenfold.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine for a teenager who's growing up with social media and being influenced by everything that they see on social media. And so I think, as parents, it's one, really being, educating our kids from an early age too, right? If we're talking about being preventative, is having hard conversations and teaching our kids about different things to kind of expect or prepare for early on. And obviously you would use kind of age-appropriate language, right? So it's where kind of teaching our kids that, social media, again, can be really great and positive in these ways, but can be very harmful in these ways, right? And that teaching them that, what other people are posting, it's not always the real thing, right? Everyone is posting the best image of themselves or however they want to present themselves to the world, right? So just being mindful of that. And, even in working with, clients is, the social media would actually have a really negative influence on their mental health and lead to lower self-worth, depression, feeling not good enough, feeling not pretty enough, right? All of these really just negative, toxic thoughts that really aren't true, right? So it's also starting at an early age, building up our children's self-worth internally, right?
That's a good point.
And making sure, and that goes back to us as parents, making sure we validate our children and we encourage them and be mindful of not judging them, right, on looks or, superficial things, right? And teaching our children to value themselves, right? So as they get older, when they start getting exposed to social media, the hope is that, they're confident in themselves already. They don't need 100 likes to feel good because they already feel good about themselves, right? And us as parents, we can start planting those seeds from a very early age by the way we talk with our children, right? And then also too that, again, social media can be very positive also. So it's about, what do you focus on, right? Are you focusing and following all of these people who make you feel bad about yourself, right? Or you have a choice, right? You can choose to follow people who make you feel good, right? So reminding our children that they have choices, right? They can choose to put themselves in better situations, right? And then as a parent too, really just kind of monitoring it, as you need to, setting limits and boundaries with social media.
That's important. And like, as you're talking about that, I'm like, I need to set a boundary for myself on social media.
I mean, absolutely, because it also can be so overwhelming, right? It can be incredibly overwhelming and trying to keep up, and it's a lot, So for me, I'll go on for just a certain amount of time, and then I'm done. You know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good tips for sure. It's so easy to just like get lost in all of the information and just be, consuming all the time, which we definitely don't want to be. So
Mm-hmm. But hopefully, I mean, hopefully this was helpful to the folks who are watching, just to kind of have this conversation, bring mental health to the forefront. But if there are any questions, we could also, if anyone wants to put anything in the comment box.
guess if you don't feel comfortable leaving a comment, because it is attached to your personal Facebook, feel free to, in that Google form, at the bottom where there's like space for additional comments, just let us know and I can field that question to Ms. Chen. Yeah. But I guess otherwise, I think that's pretty much the end of our talk today. Again, like both, Jen, I'm like Jen, Miss Chen, and myself, we are so invested in these topics, and it's really from what like we've seen sort of happen over the past year and a half, and a lot of times, again, it is just bringing awareness. That's like the first step. I think that's the hardest, even to just like recognize that something's not right. I need to get help, or I need to get help for my kid. It's the first step, and it can be daunting. So we just also wanted to end this talk, again, just letting everyone know that we are, I know it sounds really cliche, but we are here for you. One of my passions is just connecting people. If I can't help you directly, I will probably know someone who can. And it is all about, the connections and the relationships that we make in the end. So that's just something that I wanted to end on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is really just a wealth of resources out there. So, if anyone is looking for resources, again, feel free to reach out to me too, and I can connect you to other people, other organizations, for that support. So really kind of taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. This was such a nice time and just conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was helpful for our parents and our students who tuned in. So
yeah. So hopefully, yes. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes. All right. Bye, Jocelyn.
Bye.